I'll start off and I'll just say today is June 29th, 2012, and we are here with Marlene Baumhover in Cedar Falls, Iowa, and I am Jean Richardson. Marlene, you have some pictures in your scrapbooks you want to share with us first?
Well, yes, I do, and I found this page. Now that's actually, this is my teacher. Her name was Dorothy Wollenberg. That's me. And this is Larry Armstrong. This is my brother. This is Mavis Armstrong. And that's Carl Peters. And this was another Armstrong girl, but I can't remember her name. But you can see that this is the teacher's car. She drove and parked it right by the schoolhouse. And that was the way that she got to school. I can remember my mother saying that when she went to a country school, her teacher drove a horse and buggy, and she got to, if she was dilly-dallying along the way, the teacher would come along and she would get to ride with her. But anyway, this quiz kid, Marlene Kennett, that was a Carroll County quiz derby entry for the state fair, and I was on that team. And this was another article that was in about the quiz derby entrance for the county is named. And along with me was Ruth Schmidt of Manning, and myself, and then Donnie Harriet of Lake City. We were the three that were on the Carroll County quiz team. We got to go to the state fair, and I don't remember if I made it through the how many rounds I went through, but I think I went down the third or fourth round. But it was a wonderful experience. I had never even been to the state fair before, so that was a new experience for me. So these were the items from this. And then I have report cards. And I don't know if this was, let's see, this would have been 8th grade in 1947. And Dorothy Wollenberg, and Mary Moore was our county superintendent. And so, and my mother, of course, signed it. And my grades. Now, I was looking at these, and I got such a kick out of them. I never liked math. Typical girl. I didn't think I could do math, but everything else was pretty good. And you can see that we had, well, phonics. And she's written science in there, and reading, spelling, writing, arithmetic, geography, grammar, history, and music, and phys ed. We didn't have any that I recall. We just went outside and played. But we did have hygiene and civics and etc. Word study skills. But and I guess I was okay in all these areas. But this would have been my 8th grade report card. And then this one, this is kind of in backward order. This was 7th grade. And as you can see on here, this was Sheridan number 7, but it was called Buck Run number 7. It was in Sheridan Township. And the schoolhouse was on the corner. It was a half-mile away. And I walked to school. And the property that the schoolhouse was on, eventually my father bought that farmland, and he bought it after the schoolhouse had been torn down. But for a while, then I owned it. And but Buck Run number 7, that always stuck with me.
That been in the 50s or the 60s when it was torn down?
Probably in the 60s. It would probably the early 60s. It might have been gone. And again,
one of the last to close, maybe.
It could be, yeah, probably. And in this one, I got a D in arithmetic at an 85. But math was always something that current events and art. And I think about her, all the grade levels that she taught, and how meticulous. Look at her writing. She was a typical school teacher. She lived with her mother in Carroll and drove back and forth, which was about 10 miles each day. And she was, I always felt like she had a special interest in me, and I don't know if she did or not, but you know, you like to think you're
She made
special
you feel that way.
to the teacher. Yes. Let's see, this was 8th grade. I went into country school, as we called it, when, you know, farmers moved the 1st of March, and my parents made a move the 1st of March, and I had to go to a country school. I came from a Scranton Consolidated School, so which was a big, to me, a huge building, and it isn't really, I look at it now, that had 1st through 12th. And so when going from that to a country school was a real change for me.
And what grade was that?
6th grade.
Okay.
I was in 6th grade. So I finished out the year, 6th grade year, and then 7th and 8th grade in the country school. But it was I look back now, and it was a charming experience. It really was. It just gave you a perspective that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And some opportunities too, because there weren't very many of us.
How many?
Well, when I graduated, I don't know how many were in that class, but there were. Looks like there was quite a group.
Now, is that the whole county, though, maybe?
Yeah, the whole county. This was Carroll County, and these were all the graduates. So there was quite a group of us. So you know that the country schools in Carroll County were going strong to have that many. But this was my 8th grade graduation. They called it rural graduation for Carroll County. And it was at Cedar Falls, Carroll High School auditorium. So it was pretty big time, we thought. And
So it was Carroll, not I'm thinking of this little Sheridan building, but it's not.
no, that was part of Carroll County. And I did two songs. I sang 2 solos for our graduation, and Slumber Song and Pippa's Song. I don't remember those songs, but I sang them. And some of the other students that had some musical training did that. Performed also. And the teachers, and this was mine, Dorothy Wollenberg.
So this would be the number of country schools you had in the county, if these are the teachers.
Yes.
Or at least those with 8th graders that year.
You're right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 schools.
It's a lot of schools for one little county, isn't it?
And this was in 1948 at that time, so they were still going strong. And I remember her. She was a very lovely lady, and I was kind of in awe of her because she was the county superintendent.
Would you have known her before you started country school?
No. And I thought it was interesting that there was, at that time, that there was a female county, as I look back, a female county superintendent, because a superintendent of schools at that time was a man. That was, in the consolidated schools. But that was kind of interesting to find that. And this was in the paper after our graduation. And Carolyn Bolger beat me out as the top student she had an average of 94 to lead the 42 8th grade pupils, and I had a 93, and the next gal had 92, and Ruth Schmidt.
So he said there were 42 students, and how many rural schools did we say were represented? 19. So about a little more than 2 per school.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how many were in your class, in your school?
There was another boy, okay. Harry Armstrong was his name.
Okay.
And so he had sisters there too. And I found some, this was my 8th grade examination record card. And so these were the areas that we were tested on. The reading and writing and orthography, arithmetic, geography, grammar, history, music, health, civics, and science. And then this was an additional in music and health. So, and signed by Mary L. Moore. Our address was Glidden, Iowa. And our phone at that time, which was a party line, was through Lidderdale, Iowa. And then I had to go to high school in Carroll, Iowa. So we were kind of out about 10 miles from every place. And
So you didn't really know where you were from, did you?
So this was, these were interesting. And I also found some of the questions, which I thought were...
From the 8th grade exam?
Yes. This was the list of spelling words, evidently, that we had to be able to spell. There were 50 words.
Were those ones maybe that you had to practice? Would that have been a
I'm
practice
sure
list?
that we did. I can remember that. Miss Wollenberg really drilled us in spelling. We had list upon list that we worked on. And then this was the history. And we evidently, it said answer 5 of the questions, so we could choose the 5. And I assume that these little pencil marks are what I was doing. What work was accomplished by each of any 5 of the following. So obviously I chose Charles Lindbergh and Zebulon Pike, and plus 3 more. But I thought these were very interesting. Name 4 prominent explorers and state what nation each represented and state which regions each explored. And name 6 nations that took part in World War. Name 4 important leaders and give the date of the armistice. I mean, we were drilled, really drilled. We had to know this stuff. Name 3 great American inventions, and how have these inventions aided in the development of our country. And we were timed on this test. I do remember that. We had, I don't remember how many hours, but I know everybody start and you'd work through one section and then stop and then start, and they monitored us very carefully. They really did walk up and down the aisles looking over our shoulders. So that was that part. And this one, arithmetic. As I read through these, I had to chuckle. It said you answer 10 questions. And you can see I have read through and checked and probably gone back and checked. But to see what I would do. Helen's marks in arithmetic for 5 days, and it gave the 94, etc. What was her average mark? And the man had a bank balance of so much at the beginning of last month. He has since given checks and then the amounts. He also made a deposit of $35. What is his balance now? So a man was employed to collect $1,250 in debts at a commission of 5%. How much did he receive if he collected 85% of the debts? So they were interesting. They did, up here I thought also this, 1/4 of a bushel, how many pecks is that? 3/8 of a gallon, how many quarts? 1/3 of a foot. So we really were expected to know those things. 1 gross, how many things is that? And 1 cubic foot is how many cubic inches. And just the stories themselves, the story problems. Mary's making a linen dresser cover, 33 inches by 17.5 inches. How much lace must she buy to put lace all around the edge, allowing 2.5 inches extra at each corner for turning? Find the cost at 25 cents a yard. You know, today that would not be a story problem that would work for students. They couldn't relate to that at all. And just any. Mr. Jones borrowed $5,000 on January 2nd, 1926 at 6%. He repaid all the money plus the interest on March 17th, 1926. What was the total amount he paid? And Mr. Johnson bought a tractor, and another problem involved a farmer using his tractor for 696 hours for all kinds of work. And so this was, and also here's one, we had to find the volume of the silage in a silo. And so you could tell it was typical rural, appropriate story problems. But I'm sure this was really something that I had to struggle with and think very hard, and I probably had pencil marks all over the paper. No use of calculators because they didn't even have them back then. And the written reading, you had to, evidently, the poem down here. In each of the stanza of the poem given below, what are the things for which America is said to be beautiful? So it was comprehension here. Then you had to know, answer by true or false. Hiawatha was written by Tennyson. True or false. In reading silently, the lips and tongue should move. And Evangeline was written by Longfellow, and Snowbound was written by Whittier, and I read orally for personal information. So it was that kind of testing. And then you had to, it says oral reading, so read the above poem orally to the conductor of the examinations. So we did have to go up, that was part of the 8th grade examination, go up and read aloud.
How long, do you remember how long you were there? Was this a morning? Was this a whole day?
I don't remember exactly, other than it seems to me we were there all morning. I just imagine, we had to go to the courthouse in Carroll County to take this, and the exam was given there. So, but I remember the timing of it, and each division of it was set up. So maybe it was an entire day. I cannot see how we could have done all of that with that many students in just a half a day. So it could have been a day, but it was a big deal. I do remember that. Talk about stress and being prepared. Like I say, Miss Willenberg drilled us, and I'm sure she had a background, knew what she was preparing us for, what she knew we would have to endure. And the music questions. Write 5 kinds of notes and their corresponding rests, and you had to define sharp, flat, and treble clef, and you had to know those things. You had to name 2 patriotic songs, 2 hymns, and 1 folk song. And hymns would certainly not be something that would be appropriate today. Those would not be sung even. And you had to write the first stanza of America. And in what ways does the Victrola help in learning music? We did have a Victrola but it was one that you wound up, had to crank up. And then hygiene. Name 5 health habits you should observe. They also ask you to name 2 evil effects of cigarettes, plus alcohol. But I don't remember, because at that time people didn't know about the really serious health hazards for cigarettes. And my father was a smoker. He smoked Lucky Strikes.
Suppose maybe it was more like fire hazards, or
I don't know. Maybe bad breath or something like that. I don't know. And 3 things you would do to prevent eye strain. And that what should you do to prevent tuberculosis?
what did you do to prevent tuberculosis?
I don't recall. I'm sure that it was probably had to do with hand washing and being, not taking very good care of yourself. Why is it important to get rid of body wastes? And then there's a matching situation down here. You have to match tea and coffee, harmful for children. That would be the match for that. And the windpipe, the trachea. But very basic hygiene, and yet detailed. I remember too, because I thought this was interesting, that you should always hang your pajamas up when you got out of them in the morning. Hang them up so they could air out, not put them under your pillow. I remember being taught that.
Perhaps they weren't washed very often, too.
Probably once a week,
Oh, okay.
I'm sure that because Mother always did the laundry, I mean, she had a electric washing machine. When they got electricity, not on this farm, but in the prior farm, there had not been electricity at first, and then when it came in, she did get an electric washing machine. So, but I enjoyed going back and thinking about these things when I ran across them and found them. And this is my 8th grade, my Carroll County Schools, my diploma. Look at the lovely penmanship that Dorothy had. And then the superintendent. And then I looked at this, and this handwriting, I thought maybe the M's matched, so I wonder if Mary Moore wrote our names in.
That is lovely penmanship.
And certainly something that is not, I can remember we did the Palmer method, and over and over and over again. This was the Great Seal of Iowa. But anyhow, that was something else that I had. And let's see, there must be something in here that I've got the page marked. Oh, here we are. This picture was in the paper, the Carroll paper, and there we are actually taking the 8th grade exam.
And that's you?
That's me. And I think Mother went to the Carroll Daily Times Herald and bought this picture. And then this was the certificate, again, signed by Mary Moore, that admitted me to high school, that I took when I went into register. And this is grade 6, so this would have been when I finished up. See, it started out Scranton Grade School Pupils Report, and then, and I assume that I had to turn this over when I went, then the teacher has written in Sheridan Buckrun 7 for this last column. We also had, looks like the Weekly Reader.
And a grade for that, too.
Mm-hmm. Church school, now that was at Scranton Consolidated. I've thought about that. This was a consolidated school, and we were dismissed at 9 o'clock on Friday mornings, every Friday morning, to go to our church for Bible study.
Oh, my.
And no adult walked us. The Methodist church was just across the street from the school, so we just simply ran across. Christian church was a block away, and the Catholic church was probably 3 blocks away. The children would just go on their own. Think how things have
And
changed.
everybody went to one
Mhm.
church or another.
Mm-hmm. So this was the 6th grade report card. But I did find this. Now that's struggling away probably with math.
All right. Oh, we need to put this on our. We didn't have that recorded.
Okay. Now these were some art projects that I dearly loved, and oh my, I thought this was so wonderful. I really enjoyed doing this. I had to make a template, and brought the tea towel. I'm sure it was a feed sack of some kind. It's kind of a coarse fabric, but and I remember Miss Willenberg, showing me how to shade, just brush in lightly, and to use the different shades of green, and then working on that, and then we'd press it. And I can't remember if we used a cloth dipped in vinegar or something, and then we pressed it there to set the fabric, to set the colors and stuff. And even my children know about this because they've used it to dry dishes. And this was a little skater, a little apple skater. And I remember doing the eyebrows, and thought that was so charming. But Miss Willenberg did a lot of things like this for me, and I don't remember, maybe the other girls also did it, but the boys didn't. They did other things. So she really did try to meet all of our needs. But I still have these. I love them. But yes, they have been used. They've got some stains on them, but I hate to bleach them because I'm afraid that the colors might come out.
Oh, so they've never been bleached.
One other thing that she also had us do that I remember so completely is in geography we studied South America. And we had these big sheets of, I assume, like a poster board or something, and the outline of the South America, and then the countries were in that. And then we had to put in things like rivers and the capitals and major cities, the mountains, all the physical aspects of the country. And then we had to make little symbols and then have a key at the bottom. And I loved doing that, and I can still remember Bolivia had tin, and I worked and worked to draw a little tin can and put it in there. But, you know, that made me, when I was a teacher, realize how much that kind of a project helped you retain the information. And at the same time, you could use your creativity, and you had to do your own research, make sure you got everything labeled correctly, and you got to keep this huge picture of South America. And I just bet that was a country we studied for maybe a half a year or something, 1 year semester. But I can visualize that map yet. That was just I loved doing that kind of thing. So.
Okay, I think we'll start on the questions. And I just noticed your plate holder here.
Yes.
I wonder if we put it here, if it might be high enough.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm going to take some of the plates off down here. It's kind of heavy otherwise. Maybe I'll take off. These are pewter, so maybe I'll take off. So they're very heavy. I'll leave one on the top layer because that might, that'll probably be the height that you would like. This is that Wilma Armatel, that's. What do you think?
put it here. I think it's going to be perfect. I'm going to have you sit down again.
Okay.
I might put just a little. Raise it just a little more.
You need a book?
There's glasses in there. Maybe a book. Oh, this was good, wasn't it?
Bud's reading it. I haven't read it yet.
It's very good, and it's very easy to read. I think. That should do it.
You sure? You need anything else?
What years did you attend country school?
Well, let's see, my 8th grade graduation was in 1948 that spring, so 47 would have been 7th grade, so 1946 I would have started. That was, I finished out the 6th grade and then the 7th grade and the 8th grade.
And you said you lived a half a mile away?
Yes.
Do you remember any task that you had to do before you went to school?
Well, my parents did not have, or mother did not have a gas stove until I probably started high school. There was a cook stove, so I had to go out, and there was a cob shed, and I had to make sure there was a basket of cobs in. That was my job. She burnt corn cobs in the stove, the cook stove. She could bake wonderful ancient food cakes, and I never could figure out, because that stove, you know, there was no way to regulate the fire. Also, I had to gather eggs, and I disliked that task because the hens would peck me if I wasn't fast enough, because you'd slide your hand underneath. My dad could do that, and they would never bother him. He was kind of a gentle soul. I think they knew that they had me buffaloed, and so I at times would even reach in and grab them and throw them off and then get the eggs, but those two things had to be done.
Do you remember what clothes you would have worn?
Well, you know, cotton dresses, warm dresses most of the time, or skirts, and
even in the cold winter.
Well, we wore slacks then, heavy slacks. I didn't have snow pants at that point in my life. I probably felt I was too old for that. And boots of some kind. But
the rubber boots, perhaps?
Mm-hmm.
Red rubber boots?
No, they weren't red. They probably would have been black. Very plain.
And how did the clothing change in the winter?
Well, of course, you would wear, you know, jacket and mittens. I always had mittens. I don't remember having gloves. And scarves. A scarf rather than a stocking cap. Wore scarves.
Do you remember what time you would have left for school?
Well, probably, I'm sure the school day started at 9. It was a traditional. And so probably 8:30 would have started walking, or before. You'd get out to the end of the lane, and then you'd think of something that you had to go back and get. And I had a kid brother. He was in the 2nd grade when I was in the 6th grade. And as a typical little brother, he was always tormenting me. So I would try to send him on his way, and then I'd go tagging along, or I'd try to get out and get ahead of him. And we carried our lunch in a black, very functional lunchbox. There wasn't anything fancy.
Do you remember anything else along the way besides a tormenting brother?
Well, it was a gravel road, and I can remember the dust, and your shoes would be quite dusty by the time you got to school. It was a half mile, and there was another farm on the opposite side of the road, about a quarter of the way there, And those children went to a Lutheran school, a parochial school, so they were taken into town. It was primarily a Lutheran and Catholic community. We were probably the only Methodists in that area. So that family was Lutheran, and then north of us lived a Catholic family, and they had a Catholic grade school in Lidderdale also, so those children went to that school. But I remember the dust, as we would just, you'd kick that up as you walked along the gravel road. And the ditches. The ditch around the schoolhouse would, in the spring and summer, would be filled with the daylilies. And I always thought that was interesting. I wondered if somebody had planted those at one time, or if how they came to be in the ditch. They were just beautiful, the orange daylilies. But they were in the ditch. They weren't around the schoolhouse. And there was a gravel entrance from the road into the schoolyard, but it was very short. And so Miss Woolenberg would just drive in there and park her car right up next to the schoolhouse.
Let's talk about the schoolyard and the playground.
It was just very plain. I don't remember, well, there wasn't any play equipment per se, as you would expect or find on another town schoolyard. It seemed to me that we did have a pole of some kind with the ball on it, and we would bat that around a lot. But we played like tag and Annie over. Played ball. We'd have a bat and a ball. Did that kind of thing. There weren't very many of us, so we just took turns. I can remember if you hit the ball, why, you got to run around a little bit, and because we didn't have enough of an enrollment to have teams or anything like that.